I want you home desperately, Amy. I miss you very much, Amy. Very much. Oh, happy birthday. We miss you. Come home. It's very difficult to have a birthday party without the birthday girl.
Happy birthday, Amy, and I hope you're still alive, and I hope you can hear me, and I hope you come home soon.
I'd like her to give us her birthday present by coming home.
There's nothing that you can work through and get over. You can't. You just keep saying, why? What's happening? Why? Where is she? Why?
I would hope that if she's listening, that she keeps her spirit and keeps her faith, because that's what's going to get everybody through this, Amy, is keep your spirit, and we're going to get you.
This is Amy Mihaljevic. She was abducted on October 27, 1989 from Bay Village, Ohio, and her body was found 50 miles away in a field on February 8, 1990, and the case has remained unsolved. Amy's murder has left her hometown devastated, and to this day, if you refer to Amy's case as cold, police will quickly correct you by stating that it's an open and ongoing investigation. Even those who have retired from the department will tell you that Amy is always on their minds. They have never forgotten this little girl. And once you hear her story, you'll never forget Amy either. Bay Square Shopping Center is where Amy was taken, and this past October will mark the 35th anniversary of her abduction and murder. The killer stood here, waited for her after school. He was very brazen. People were milling about, and Amy's friends even saw her talking to her killer. But he made it seem like a casual meeting. He was unafraid, and those who saw him really didn't pay close attention. This killer never gave a second thought to all the people around him, or the fact that he was so close to a school and a police department. This monster, this piece of garbage, had carefully formulated a plan to take this child, and nothing was going to stop him. The story begins here on Linford Drive, where the Mihaljevics lived. Amy lived in this home with her parents Margaret and Mark and her older brother Jason. Up to this point, Bay Village was known to be safe and family-friendly. Margaret worked at Trading Times magazine, and Mark was the field representative for General Motors. So it was routine for their two kids to return home after school and check in before going off to play or meet up with friends. What no one was aware of was that Amy was receiving calls from a man posing as a friend of her mother's. He explained to Amy that her mother had just received a promotion at work and wondered if she would accompany him to a department store to pick out a celebratory gift to surprise Margaret with. The killer most likely told Amy to be sure to keep their calls a secret, so that their surprise wouldn't be ruined. On one of the last calls Amy received, he promised to buy her a gift as a thank you for helping him. Amy was very close to her mother and just wanted to be a part of this very special surprise for her. So on October 27th, Amy would tell a lie and step into a deadly trap. She told her mother that she would be late getting home that day because she was going to try out for the school choir. It was just a small fib after all, and Margaret would forgive her once she saw her special gift. With the innocence that only a child could possess, Amy got on her bike that morning and pedaled off to school, barely able to contain her excitement. Upon seeing her friends, Amy could no longer keep her plans that day a secret. Amy told about her conversations with her mom's friend and their plan to shop for a gift. It's now early afternoon and the school bell rings and classes are over for the week. It's Friday and kids start heading out to go enjoy their autumn weekend. All but Amy. She leaves her bike in the bike rack and takes off on foot to Bay Square. The shopping center is a known hangout where kids could get an after-school snack and play a coin-operated video game. You can imagine the parking area begin to fill up with kids, adults running errands, and of course the police department is just steps away. None of this phases the predator. He has his sights locked in on his target. The time is between 2:30 and 2:45 p.m. Amy's classmates witness a man approach her. They have a brief conversation, and the man places his hand on Amy's shoulder and brazenly leads her away. No one thought twice about what they saw. Bay Village was a safe zone. No fear, no worries. The predator was counting on this reaction, and his calculations didn't fail him. This was the last time anyone would see Amy alive. 3:14 p.m. Amy's brother Jason calls his mother at work to report that Amy wasn't home yet. Margaret tells Jason not to worry, that Amy is trying out for the school choir. 3:30 p.m. Jason phones his mother again to say that Amy has still not checked in. 3:40 p.m. Margaret receives a call from Amy, and this is how the conversation went. Margaret: how did the tryouts go? Amy: fine. Margaret noticed that the usually talkative Amy is being quiet, but wasn't immediately alarmed and ended the conversation. Margaret: bye-bye. See you soon. That was the last time Margaret would ever hear her daughter's voice. Investigators believe that the killer allowed Amy to make that call because A, he knew that Amy was supposed to check in with her mother, and B, it would allow him more getaway time. Of course, he would have been standing beside her, monitoring every word she said. 4 p.m. The more Margaret thought about her conversation with Amy, the more she got a nagging feeling that something wasn't right and decided to leave work early. 4:30 p.m., Margaret arrives home and Jason states that he hasn't seen or talked to Amy. Margaret now begins to panic. She drives back to Bay Middle School and sees Amy's bike still in the rack. The school doors were locked and the parking lot was empty. Margaret said, "I knew right then it was something terrible. I was sick, shaking. I knew something terrible had happened to Amy." She immediately notified police that her daughter was missing. 5:14 p.m. The killer now has a 2-hour jump on police. The Bay Village Police Department quickly classified the case as a child abduction. The bulletin goes out with a full description of Amy. 6 p.m., Amy's father, Mark, arrives home and learns of his daughter's disappearance. Friends join him as they frantically search the neighborhood, calling her name. 7 p.m. Police and hundreds of volunteers gather as a massive hunt gets underway. 9 p.m. A command center is set up at the police station. Every member of law enforcement knows that the odds of recovering an abducted child decreases rapidly after the first 6 hours. 7:10 a.m., October 28th. The FBI joins in the search for Amy. All agents, officers, park rangers, and volunteers methodically combed over 1,500 acres in 2 counties and posted a $13,000 reward for information leading to Amy's location. Margaret clung to hope because that is all she really had. But deep inside, she felt that her child would not be found close to home. And this is what she had to say.
My instincts told me the searches wouldn't produce anything. That was just my instincts. I know they had to go through that as a part of the process.
During the late morning hours, this panic began to spread like wildfire. Amy's friends came forward with information that she had shared with them, and we were finally getting our first glimpse of a composite sketch. A profiler went to work with law enforcement to help identify the behavior of the predator that they were hunting for, and this was their analysis. White male, mid to late 30s at the time of the abduction. Average height, weight, and build. He looks presentable, but not accomplished or professional. He is socially marginalized and has difficulty fitting in with his peers, especially women. People who know him will describe him as odd or difficult. It's likely that he lives alone or maybe still lives at home with his parents. There was a drastic change in this man's life in the fall of 1989 that would have been noticeable to friends and relatives. There was a pre-event stressor, something that took him from fantasy to action. This person is well acquainted with the area. He could be a resident, a contract worker, or a delivery driver. He selected a hunting ground where he could move about comfortably. Now the police had a sketch and a profile of Amy's abductor. A base called Amy Center was set up at City Hall to coordinate volunteers, mail out flyers, and organize new searches. Then, 45 days later, on Amy's 11th birthday, Margaret and Mark launched a nonprofit organization called the Amy Foundation. It was a combination reward fund and educational program devoted to keeping children safe.
It's not that we're TV stars or people that speak in public or anything like that. You just do it because there's part of your life out there we need to get back home.
Sadly, the heartbreak was just beginning for the Mihaljevics. On February 8, 1990, Janet Siebold was out jogging at around 7:40 a.m., surrounded by farmland in Ashland County. Something caught Siebold's eye, and as she edged closer, it looked like a body partially hidden by knee-high weeds. Siebold ran to her friend's house, Patricia Kidd, who lived nearby, and screamed for help. The sheriff's department arrived minutes later and found the body of a child face down. The child was fully clothed and matched the description of what Amy was wearing when she was abducted. Even though it would take some time to confirm it was Amy, a call was placed to Amy's Center in order to brace the Mihaljevics for what was to come. A volunteer took the call and was given the difficult task of letting Margaret know of the sheriff's discovery. She said Margaret refused to believe it and told her, "It's not my daughter." By 4 p.m. that day, the Mihaljevics had confirmation that the body found in the field was indeed their daughter, Amy. While the family grieved, law enforcement got to work on the forensics of the victim's remains in the area in which she was found. This evidence would begin to tell the story of what happened to Amy. Taking into consideration the miles of secluded farmland where Amy was found, it was easy to conclude that once she had been abducted, her killer had to get her out of the more densely populated suburban area of Bay Village in order to carry out his plan. From the contents found in Amy's stomach, the coroner and FBI scientists determined that she was held captive for a small period of time and given at least 2 meals that consisted of artificial chicken or Chinese food. They were also able to confirm that she was not killed where her body was found. You can see that County Road 1118 is surrounded by farmland for miles, and the killer would most likely have lived here or grown up here to be familiar with this area. It's also highly probable that Amy was brought to a location in Ashland County and soon after killed before her killer deposited the body in this field. The location of her body also suggests that her killer knew it would be weeks or months before she would be detected. The 10-year-old was laying face down 18 feet in off the road, and she was wearing both under and outer clothing. Her socks were on, but her shoes were missing. A small amount of blood was found inside Amy's underwear, suggesting that she had been sexually assaulted, but decomposition prevented confirmation. Forensic experts were certain that Amy's clothes were removed and put back on after her death. It's unknown if the killer was unable to get her shoes back on or if he kept them as a souvenir. There was no doubt that Amy was chosen specifically by a man with criminal sexual intent. Amy had several injuries. She sustained blunt force trauma to the back of her head, and there were 2 stab wounds to the left side of her neck. One of the stab wounds sliced through Amy's carotid artery. Her fingernails were broken off, suggesting that she had tried desperately to fend off her killer. There was also a post-mortem wound of her left lateral abdominal wall. Now let's focus on some crucial pieces of evidence, and this is where the public could play an integral part of getting Amy's case solved. Here are Exhibits A through D. Exhibit A shows a blanket and curtain. 300 yards from Amy's body, investigators found a white blanket and a thick olive green curtain that appears to have been made from a quilt or a bedspread. Take a very good look at this curtain. It was crudely sewn, and the tabs at the top are different sizes and distances apart. It's believed that both items were used to wrap Amy's body in. Once Amy's body was placed in the field, the blanket and curtain were either placed over her and the wind carried them away, or they were haphazardly thrown yards away as the killer was making a quick exit. Over 20 hairs belonging to Amy and her dog were found on them. Cuttings have also been taken in an effort to find the killer's DNA. Results so far have proved to be too degraded. Moving on to Exhibit B, we'll see a list of souvenirs kept by the killer. These items may have been re-gifted to other female victims, as studies have shown that this can often be the practice of this type of predator. Number 1, Amy loved to go horseback riding and was wearing her riding boots the day she was abducted. Number 2, small blue turquoise earrings in the shape of silhouettes of a horse's head, mounted on gold metallic posts. Number 3, white nylon windbreaker. Number 4, denim backpack with red piping and black plastic buckles. Number 5, black leather folder with a brass clasp emblazoned with best in class. This item was given as an award to Amy's father, who then passed it on to her. There are only a few like it and would only have been circulated to dealers and staff of General Motors. Exhibit C are examples of GM cars manufactured between 1975 and 1978, with tan carpet fibers comparable to those found on Amy. Our last Exhibit D is some information surrounding a guest book at the Lake Erie Nature and Science Center. There were some other girls around Amy's age that received the same type of phone calls that she did. In each case, the man claimed to be a friend of their mother's and asked for help in selecting a gift for a work-related promotion. Fortunately, these girls considered the calls to be cranks and hung up. What piqued the interest of investigators was the fact that some of these children had unlisted telephone numbers. So how was the killer able to contact them? Investigators quickly found a source that linked these children to Amy. They had all been to the same nature center and signed their names along with their phone numbers and addresses. Even though some of the pieces were now beginning to fall into place, investigators were no closer to finding Amy's killer. Over 20,000 interviews were conducted, and dozens were asked to take lie detector tests. And yet investigators always seem to come back to a short list of names that they still consider to be persons of interest today. We'll now take a look at just 3 of those men that could possibly be on that list. First up, we have Billy Strunak, a 35-year-old man from Fairview Park, Ohio, who joined the volunteers at Amy's Center as soon as it was set up and spent a great deal of his time there. Beyond donating many hours of his time, he also donated several boxes of paper to print posters. The man was grilled by FBI agents early in the investigation, but he insisted that he had nothing to do with Amy's disappearance. Investigators became even more interested in Strunak when they learned that he sent 2 decorative pins to Margaret, one meant for Amy upon her safe return. After a little more digging into Strunak's background, they discovered that he stole the pins and the paper that he donated from a wholesale club that he worked for. 2 weeks after Amy's body was found, Strunak consumed a lethal amount of ethanol and died 3 days later. A search of his home did not reveal any connection to the murder, and the suicide note that he left behind made no mention of Amy. Investigators also learned that Strunak not only just broke up with his girlfriend, but was dealing with health issues and financial problems. Profiler Robert Ressler believed that Strunak's suicide was a sign of his guilt, and that he was clearly responsible for Amy's murder. Other investigators remained unconvinced. In fact, they felt that Ressler's statements falsely led the public to believe that Strunak was the perpetrator, without any corroborating evidence. Another potential suspect to come under investigators' scrutiny was identity thief Robert Ivan Nichols. He was living in Eastlake, Ohio, under the alias Joseph Newton Chandler III. Nichols stole the identity of an 8-year-old boy that died in a car crash in 1945. Investigators speculated that Nichols had committed violent crimes that he may have been hiding from. In 2002, Nichols put a .38 revolver in his mouth and pulled the trigger. Beyond bearing an uncanny resemblance to the composite sketch in Amy's case, Nichols has never been implicated in her murder. This brings us to our final person of interest, school teacher Dean Runkle. An investigation into Runkle's past showed that he had grown up in New London, not far from where Amy's body was found. The 7th grade science teacher abruptly quit his teaching job to move to Florida and manage a fast food restaurant in 2003. His students remember him as a creepy teacher that often photographed his students in class and liked to tell sexual jokes. They also stated that Runkle spoke of volunteering his time to work at the Lake Erie Nature and Science Center. Runkle has denied any involvement in Amy's murder. He claims that he was working that day and wouldn't have had time to abduct Amy from Bay Village. If the school he was teaching at in Amherst, Ohio, let out at 2:30 p.m., it would have taken him 25 minutes to drive to the shopping center. Reports have Amy talking to her abductor at 2:45 p.m. The last tip to come in on Amy's case was in January of 2019. A woman claimed that her ex-boyfriend may be a suspect. The couple reportedly lived 1.5 miles from the shopping center where Amy was taken. The woman claims that her ex-boyfriend didn't come home that night and instead called her to inquire about news coverage of the 10-year-old's abduction. Investigators' report also contained information stating that the man had relatives living in Bay Village, and his niece was in the same grade as Amy. One detective confirmed that the man drove an Oldsmobile with a tan color interior, and the fibers were similar to those found on Amy's body. That same car was seen on February 8, 1990, near the scene when Amy's body was being recovered. Although the man's lie detector test showed deception, he was never charged, and police continued to withhold his name. As every October draws near and Amy's abduction and murder goes unsolved, everyone wonders where the case stands now. Though the investigation seems to move at a snail's pace, we can rest assured that law enforcement continues to move forward on every new tip, and new testing is done when advancements in DNA profiling becomes available. Here is a brief statement from investigators just a few weeks ago.
We've definitely found some male DNA on Amy's sweatpants that we feel is promising and may result in identifying someone. We don't have the technology in the DNA world to come up with a DNA profile with the small amount that we have is close to 6 months to a year away. We've been excited a few times with this case, and we've learned to sort of hold back and to wait, so we're not let down, but this is very exciting what we have.
The Mihaljevic family has never given up hope that one day soon police will identify the monster who took Amy's life. Margaret and Mark divorced 2 years after Amy was murdered, and he eventually remarried. Amy's brother Jason has done his best to move forward in life without his little sister Amy. There is never a day that Mark and Jason don't think of Amy and all that has been lost. Margaret was never able to move on from the loss of her daughter. Amy's murder tormented her every second of her life. Margaret stayed single and moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, where she died alone at the age of 54 from complications due to alcoholism and lupus. A reporter once asked Margaret if anything good came out of the tragic death of her daughter, and this was her response. A lot of parents became aware of how fragile their children are. You think you live in some suburban bubble, but evil has a way of happening. There are cruel people out there, harsh people. All I would ask is if anyone has an inkling or suspicion, a little tiny doubt, please let authorities know. It's not for punishment. It's that this man is still out there, a terrible risk to children. Please come forward.
Just find her, tell her to come home. Whatever is wrong, just have her come home.
Are you obsessed with true crime content? Subscribe now and join our growing community as we analyze and discuss the details of some truly baffling cold cases. Browse our growing library of cold case investigations and immerse yourself in the mysteries that keep us up at night. Subscribe and join the EOJ community today. All it takes is a click.